Blanca, having Blanca here is really great because we very much view this particular event in Canada as an event of the Americas, going from Canada through the US, but including Latin America. So it's absolutely wonderful to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start by our little bit of big get to know you. You and I had lunch together, full disclosure today, and you were telling me how despite your being in what we might call a patriarchal society, your dad actually encouraged you to go into computers and engineering.
He did, and he did, think about mid-70s, even though you think about my age, but mid-70s, technology was not necessarily the word, or it was not well known, that kind of industry, so it was more computers. And my dad loved the idea that her daughter was going to be involved in something so different, so exciting. No one had ever seen a computer in any home, so for him it was incredible. And yes, he did encourage me to get into this.
But he was embarrassed that you'd be fearful about taking this on, right? You came home and said, I'm scared, I can't do this. And
it is. That's something that I like to share because people keep asking me who really encouraged you, and it was my dad. My dad, I remember when I told him that I was going to be into computers, he was so excited. But after 2 or 3 days, I went to the university and said, no, you know what, I don't want to be in computers. It might be very difficult. So I went back home. My dad was sharing this idea with his brother, bragging about her daughter. And when he left, I told, you know what, Dad, I'm not getting into computers. I'm afraid. And probably that was, I don't know if it was the right word or the wrong word, because my dad told me, afraid. I could live with the idea that my daughter is not smart. Whatever, ugly, not smart, whatever. But someone that is afraid, no, that I cannot. That I will not have it. So you better go back to the university. If that's your only constraint, I mean, if that's the reason why you decided not to get into computers, then you have to go back. And
your fearlessness continued because back then, in particular, but especially in Mexico, you're from Monterrey, has a great business community and so on. But entrepreneurship was, and you say still really isn't in the DNA too much there, and yet you started a startup.
Yeah, we did.
A tech startup.
Mid-'80s, entrepreneurs were not necessarily well known. Today, entrepreneurs is, I mean, everybody talks about entrepreneurs and all these companies that you have in the US. But at that time, I remember when you describe yourself or introduce yourself as an entrepreneur, they will say you're unemployed and you like to use this word that sounds so sexy. But no one knew about entrepreneurs at that time, right? But we were so committed, and I remember every time they would question, you are unemployed. No, we're not. We're starting this company. But to your point, in Mexico, there were not. Probably we were the first entrepreneurs at that time of that probably decade. Yeah. And so it was tough to keep on saying, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to build, or we are entrepreneurs, and we're going to build this global company. And they would look at us and say, people keep joining our company, even though we were very small. And so then they changed and they said, I don't know why people believe them, why they truly believe that Softtek is going to be a global company. It's like a cult. Right, because for them it was easy to think that way than to say that we were going to be able to build the company. Yeah. Entrepreneurs were not there, so it was. We have been fearless. It is true.
I mean, what was it? I mean, and by the way, she started this company with 4 male partners.
That is true.
So obviously, you were, typically the only woman in the room.
Not anymore, but yes, for many years.
And your advice in those situations?
You know what? I keep saying that every time that I'm in a room, I like to see each other as executives. I don't want to think about gender because we're executives at the end of the day, or team players or whatever. So my only advice, or the way that I have handled it always, it is not thinking about, oh, he's my male partner, he's my female partner. It's more about, we are executives, we all work for this company or for this board or whatever. So it's never thinking about gender. Even though I truly believe that we have to understand that we are different and there are things that are needed in order to promote much more the inclusion of women in the business. But again, it's once you're in the room, it's more why talk about gender? It's
Yeah, but you didn't come up against obstacles. Tell them about the blank resignation letter that you had to sign.
It's an interesting, because it is true. When I joined, before starting this company, I used to work for this industrial group from Mexico, a very important one. It was, I mean, getting into that group, it was something that you always wanted to do. But amazingly, it was late 70s, early 80s. And my very first day, they said, okay, you have to sign this resignation letter. I said, I just joined the company. But you have to sign it because if you get married, we don't want to have any kind of talk. You already resigned. So it is the way it was at that time. It was that, yeah. Okay, you have a chance to work here as long as you're single. Once you get married, you're not gonna be laid off. It's something that you already understand. So I signed that resignation letter. Yeah. And I'm happy I did, because when I got my engagement ring, we were starting this company. That's when we started thinking about the company. And I
You started a company as well as getting married.
Both things at the same time.
Right,
both things at the same time. But also,
I mean, given that culture, haven't you had obstacles and difficulties along the way as a woman?
I know that for some women or people, they don't believe me, but I always said that, no, I have been very privileged. And whenever they said, but that is not true, you must have faced obstacles. And probably I did, but the decision that I made, it's that if there was an obstacle there, I could always turn and take the other
right.
road. So probably there were obstacles, but there's not something that I could remember saying, this was very, very difficult. And I'm sitting in different boards. I'm the chairwoman of this global company that we have presence in so many different countries. And clients, all the Fortune 500 are clients, most of the Fortune.
Yeah.
And no, it's incredible. I have an amazing family support system. My partners are amazing also. So probably obstacles, but I decided not to engage in those obstacles. I decided to walk away from them and look for other opportunities.
So you have, the company has 300 some clients, major companies. Tell us about your nearshoring strategy that you used to help get there.
Yeah, well, the thing is, when you started, I mentioned about entrepreneurs not necessarily very well known at that time, but also Mexico in the tech business. It was very difficult, it still is, that they see Mexico as a technology powerhouse, if you want to call it that way. They don't expect that from Mexico or any company from Mexico. So when we started, we made this very strong statement. We're going to be a global company. And we meant it. We said global company. And from the very beginning, the way that we define ourselves was global. The way that we structure, it was global. But when we start opening offices in South America and even in Europe. But then we look at the US, our neighbor, very close, the largest market for anything, but also for IT services. But we were going to face, like we do in every country where we participate, those very large companies, the Accentures, the IBMs, the Indian vendors that were 10 times larger or even more than us. And so we said the only way to compete is to find our own space, to not necessarily compete face-to-face, but to differentiate ourselves. So what we did is we launched this concept that is called nearshore. Today is mainstream. It's a trademark. We are not necessarily fighting for, but it's a trademark. Yeah. And what it means really is to say we can offer similar things that the Indian vendors, but with all the advantages of being near. Remember, Mexico and the US have been partners for years. So we have worked together as partners, meaning both economies, for years. So emphasizing that doing this kind of work, IT services from a nearby location, could have benefits. So it was like, in a way, tackling the deficiencies of the Indian model.
So it's nearshore versus offshore.
That's correct.
That's what you're trying to say.
Correct.
Like you're
at that time, it was
good
the
marketing.
Way. It was a good market. And you know what? I remember we retained the services of this marketing company 25 years ago, and we said, we like nearshore. And they told us, don't use nearshore. They'll bring they will think about all the disadvantages of offshore. So we pay them, I don't know how much money we didn't have, like $300,000. I didn't have the money, but we pay them, and we left the room and said, we're going to call it nearshore. So we spent that money, and at the end, I mean, today, people don't know that it is a trademark. All vendors, IT service provider use that term. So it helps us. It helps us because, fearless from the beginning. Yeah.
So Blanca, get your questions ready. And Blanca can talk about all of Latin America, too, and give a broad perspective about the region and technology if you have questions there. What would you say about the status of women in Latin America in leadership and in STEM?
Well, I think in every country we face similar challenges. And I mean, we all want to have more women in the C-suite, or not even the C-suite, but in the second or third level. We need more women. Like I said before, talent has no gender, and the company or the economy that it's able to attract the most brilliant talent is the one that is going to be more successful. So you don't want to leave behind women. So I believe that we do face similar challenges, but when you think about Latin America, we also have a culture issue that not necessarily Canada or the US face. It's more, and it's not the companies or not, it's more related to family. It's more related to society. It's really, if you ask me, the policies are there. Companies are open and willing to bring more women. But then those women at the beginning, they are probably being questioned by their own families. And not always, but it's more common that here in the US. And sometimes not the families, but the mothers of your daughter's friends that will say that you're not necessarily paying enough attention to your kids. I have 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and they're amazing, so I did pay enough attention to my family.
And you would go to school, you told me you'd go to school just to show up, to make sure that you And we were sharing stories, because I've also raised children while working and traveling and everything, and I told you the best piece of advice I ever got from a child development person was, they smell guilt. Don't give off the whiff, the scent.
Yeah. Like, no, but that's what I told you.
And that's what
I told you. Every time that they asked me, what would you say? It was, even before you told me, that's what I said. Because I said, the best piece is never feel guilt. Never feel guilty, because if you do, your children will feel that, will smell that, and they will grow as victims. And if they grow as victims of you, that's not the way to raise a kid. You don't want your kids to raise feeling victims of something. So do not ever make anyone smell that guilt. Yeah. It's horrible for it's unfair for your kids. It's not unfair for you. It's unfair for your kids to be raised feeling that way. Yeah.
And congratulations on incredible daughters and granddaughters.
Incredible daughters and incredible granddaughters.
Do we have questions right here in front? Mike? Yes. And just identify yourself. Stand up.
Stand. Hi, Blanca. Thank you so much. It's Irene Britt, and I'm on several boards, as we talked about earlier. So political rhetoric between the U.S. and Mexico has been in the news a lot. I'm wondering how that has potentially affected business opportunities, as well as culture within your culture and motivation within your company.
Excellent question.
Yes, it is. Well, like you said in the previous session today, it seems like it's a competition between which country is facing most challenges, but it is true. Lately, in the past months, it has been in this going all the kind of things to talk about our relationship and the new NAFTA. I keep forgetting the new name.
USMCA. It's
USMCA, but the new NAFTA has been in negotiations for many months, and in the past months, this President Trump decided to probably put in the same kind of negotiation, different issues, and that put a lot of pressure to your point, because it was no longer just about the commercial side, the trade side of this. It was something else to get from that. I believe that we have been partners, I mean, the US, Canada, and Mexico for many years. We are a very strong region when we work together. And no matter what kind of agreements we have at the end, it's going to be very difficult to break the breach that we have today, the supply chains that we have today. I don't, sooner or later, elections or before elections, I think we're going to get an agreement that will allow us to keep leveraging the advantages that we have as a region.
Are you happy with the direction of the USMCA?
Well, I think it needed the kind of, remember that it was signed almost 30 years ago, so there were things that were needed to get improved, right? There will always be things that you like or don't like, but it is true that it was something that was needed to include, for example, intellectual property. It was not there.
Right.
Services were not there. Again, it was signed.
It was mostly about trucks and stuff back in
right.
93.
They keep fighting about trucks, but if they look at a Tesla, look at a Tesla. It no longer has a motor or things like that. So talk about those things. It's a computer within the car.
Yeah.
But they keep talking about that and the border, and I like to say,
it's almost like an alternate reality that they're living in.
But to your point, one thing that I cannot deny is that probably some companies are waiting or expecting. I mean, foreign investment, expecting what's going to happen before I make my next investment. But regardless of that, the foreign investment is growing in Mexico. I will not say that probably they have some concerns. Our people, it's not necessarily talking about the culture within our company. We're today the largest IT service provider in Latin America, but also the US is our largest market. The second largest market is Europe. It's not Mexico. So we are, in a way, dependent of this, but when you're in services, no matter the agreement, this is not going to have a huge impact in us, and we are not necessarily, we are very balanced in where the revenues come from.
Was there another question? Yes. You have to identify yourself again.
Yes, okay. Marcia Moff at BlackRock. It's a related question, but I won't repeat it, so I won't repeat the elements that I was thinking of. I'm interested in, so I get an opportunity to hear from a lot of business people here in Canada and in the US. I don't often get to hear from business leaders from Mexico, and I'm really curious. And I hear what you're saying about much of your business being outside the country in the US and Europe and other parts of Latin America. Where do you see, as you're thinking about your business in the future, where are you seeing the opportunities and the growth? The world is changing, but we can look at it as it's changing and it's all negative for us, or we can look at it as the change can benefit those who embrace the change and lean into it. So I'm curious as to how you're thinking about your strategy.
Okay. One thing that I believe it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in 3 years. I'm in this industry that changes so fast and so much that to think what's going to be there in 4 years, in 3 years, just think what we didn't have in technology 5 years ago. Probably Uber was not here, I don't remember, but things change so much that one thing that will be constant is uncertainty. So planning what's going to be there in 5 years is going to be tough. I might be hugely mistaken. Whatever I say today could be so crazy, and probably it will be real in 5 years. So one thing that I want to emphasize is that uncertainty, how difficult it is today to plan ahead for 5 years, 6 years. Having said that, I will say that opportunities are everywhere when you're involved in this kind of industry. Today, most of your companies are technology companies. Most of the challenges that we face, no matter if it's security, if it's a financial, need and are leveraged by technology. So I do believe that opportunities will be everywhere. If you look at Africa and the things that you can do with technology, if you're asking me about the industry that I participate in, if you ask about the US, think about it as the largest consumer of IT services. So for us, there's opportunities everywhere, meaning I don't know which kind of technology is going to be there, what kind of services that will be needed, but what it is, something that it's going to be very obvious is technology is going to be part of those opportunities, and we truly believe that we're going to be able to leverage that, and we want to be part of that also.
One really quick question, because we have to wrap it up. When you and I were talking earlier, I asked you, where do you see the most kind of women in leadership positions in Latin America? And you said Colombia, not Mexico or...
No, for me, it's always been surprising. We have a strong presence in Latin America, and obviously in Mexico we started there. But every time that I go to Colombia, I notice that you find in Colombia many more women CEOs than any in any other country
very
in Latin America. It is interesting because if you try to say, what was the difference? Why is the reason for that? Because if you look at Mexico or Chile or Brazil, whatever, there's this list of 100, the most, businessmen or business people. In Mexico, there's just 99 men and me in that list. And, 98. There was another woman last year. There are not many. It hasn't changed in many years. But in Colombia, you've been to Colombia? Yeah. I don't know what is different, but you do find more people, more women there.
Blanca, we are so glad you're on that list. You've been called the Sheryl Sandberg of Mexico just simply for supporting women and women in technology as well as building a great company. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.